So now that we use CSS modules, let's also use the concept here in the course input component. We got the course input CSS file, and as you learned, you need to change the name to .module.css. With that, I mean the file name. So course input.module.css. In the course input component, you then import from course input.module, and as you learned, you import something from there. Again, the name is totally up to you. Typically, you name it styles or classes or anything like that. We can remove the styled import from styled components because I'm going to comment out this form control. Like this. I'm not going to use it anymore. Instead, down there, I'll go back to my good old div. And on that div, I will add class name to styles.form control. And now we have a problem. This is an invalid property name, but I named my class form control in here. Well, it's not a problem. We just have to use a different syntax for accessing the property. We use the square brackets and wrap this name into single quotes. This is how we can also access properties in JavaScript, and with that we can also access properties with such a name. Because strings are valid keys in JavaScript objects. Alternatively, of course, you pick different CSS class names without dashes in them. Here, however, I'll stick to that, and therefore now we got our styling back. Now, of course, the invalid style is not getting applied. And the reason for that is simple. For that invalid style to be applied, we need to make sure that the invalid CSS class is added on the element. And currently, that's never happening. We're only adding form control, only adding this class, or the transformed CSS modules version of that class, to be precise. We're never adding the transformed invalid class version. It is something we can also do easily, though. We can go back to that backtick syntax to create a string where we inject values. And the first value I want to inject is that resolved class name here. So I inject this converted class name, which we're in the end extracting from that styles object, here into this string. With that, if we save this, nothing should change. And now, of course, just as before, we can add an additional class here. We can check if not is valid, and if that's the case, I add styles.invalid here, referring to that converted version of that invalid class. Converted because that's what the CSS module process will do behind the scenes. And invalid because the CSS class name is invalid in here. So with that, we're adding this converted version of our own class, this scoped version of this CSS styling, so to say, to this div if is valid is false. If we now save this and we go back, if I click add goal, it's red. If I type, it's no longer red. It gets red again, and so on. So this now works again, but now we're adding dynamic classes here with CSS modules. It's not really that different from normal classes, because these are normal classes. We just extract the converted class names as they were generated by CSS modules. That's all. And then we combine them as needed. Last but not least, let's see how media queries are set up in CSS modules. And for that, let's go back to the button. There, I had a media query in my styled components. So we can copy that and go to the CSS file which we're using now. And here, you just add a media query as you would always add it. Maybe here at the bottom. Let me get rid of these slashes. The important difference to styled components, of course, is that now you need your selector again. You always need that in CSS. The non-selector syntax here in styled components is really just a styled components feature because it processes your CSS code. This is not CSS code that would work like this in a browser because CSS always needs a selector, and that's why we need to add a selector here. With that, however, we got everything we need. We set the width here to 100% on small devices, and then on bigger screens, we reset it to auto. And that should be all that's needed. No other changes are required because I'm working on the same CSS class, which I'm already adding to the component here. So with that, you see I have the big button there, and on bigger screens, it's the smaller one. So that also works, and it also works with CSS modules. Now, ultimately, it's absolutely up to you which approach you prefer. I showed you the CSS only, the styled components, and the CSS modules approach, and I mentioned the different pros and cons. And you can simply use the approach you like. For the rest of this course, I will use CSS modules because I like that scoping and I like having my CSS code and my JavaScript code separated, but if you prefer a different approach, that's of course also perfectly fine.